This is an SBC Media Partners production.
Swung on, hit high and deep, right field.
Could it be? Could it be? It is out of here. Phillies fans, these are your glove stories with Murph.
Let's check in with Gregg Murphy. Murph, you got a special guest, huh?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Glove Stories with Murph. New podcast, a new venture for us that we're really excited about. You know, over the last 25 years, I've had a front row seat to talk and listen to the guys that have played the game. But we thought, why not bring those stories to you? And if we're going to bring you the stories of the Phillies organization, well, you have to start with number 20, Michael Jack Schmidt, who is our first guest, and we are really excited to have him. Mike, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, Murph, I'm honored to be your first guest. Thank you. Going to stretch my brain a little bit this morning. We're going back, at least 30 years in some cases here. So I don't know whether I have all the details in order like I'd like. I'll do my best.
We never let facts get in the way of a good story, Mike. You know that, right. So that's fine. But, it's funny because I always marvel at how you guys who have played the game are able, though, to recall events that happened decades ago. And it really is interesting. You know, you're able to remember them and be back in that moment. And that's kind of what we're hoping to do with this podcast. So let's start with you back in 1972 when the major league call up. You played a handful of games in 72 and then a full season in 73. What do you remember about, I'm sure you remember the feeling you had when you knew you were going up to the big leagues.
Well, first, let me mention something totally off subject. Do you have any kind of little play away music where if I get too long?
You don't worry about that. We'll take care of that.
All right. Yeah. Exciting time for all of us. It got called up in September of that 1972 year. Booney, myself, I think maybe Mike Wallace. There was a left-handed pitcher way back then, just to name three. I may be leaving somebody out, but when you get the call to go to Philadelphia from Eugene, Oregon, that's a trip all the way across the country that you want to make for sure. In my case, it was a little different because I had injured my left knee pretty severely in the playoffs in AAA and really was unable to play, actually. My buddies went up and got in the lineup pretty quick, but I went to Philadelphia and went directly to the hospital for what I thought was going to be a pretty serious knee surgery. And so that was kind of tough on me, not being able to go right up and play. I had a pretty good year in AAA that year, and I felt confident that, I could do some things to show the club that maybe next year was a year for me to be a rookie in the major leagues. So there was a famous surgeon at that time. His name was John Moore. His middle name was John Royal Moore, and he was highly known in Philadelphia for putting bodies back together from car wrecks. And if people out there ever Google John Royal Moore, he was at that time the Phillies team surgeon. And I was all prepped for surgery the morning after I got there, and he came in and he asked me to go out in the hallway, and I'll never forget exactly what he said to me. He said, I want you to get in a stance, in a football stance, like you're a wide receiver, and I want you to fire out. I'll never his words. He said, fire out, like I was coming off the scrimmage line. And I am in the hallway with, an hospital gown on and a little drowsy, from the needle I got to keep me nice and relaxed. And, my butt is hanging out the back and people walking past, pushing gurneys and this stuff. So there I go. And I went, boom, and fired out. And the surgeon said, son, if you can do that, there's no reason to operate.
Wow.
Yeah. And wouldn't you know, 4 or 5 days later, after a little rehab with Don Seeger, I was in the lineup. and got my first major league hit. And it's just the way things work in life. Well, that was one of the little things that totally changed my life. I mean, if he decides to do a surgery and I don't get to play at all in the call-up year in 72, my whole life, my whole career would have changed. I mean, you know, everybody has those kind of things that are life-changing. Some of them good, some of them bad. But for me, I think the far outweigh the bad. And I'm sure we'll talk about several others along the way. But yes, being called up, of course, was an exciting time for a baseball player when you first get to put a major league uniform on.
No doubt about it. I'm just thinking about what if they had cell phone cameras when you were firing off the line of scrimmage there in your hospital gown. How great that video.
Yeah.
All right. So 72, you play a little bit. 73, you have your rookie season, 18 home runs, but the batting average wasn't there. I know you've again talked about that first season, the first full season, and how you had your struggles for sure, both on the field, maybe even questioning whether or not you belong there. But then in 1974, you're back, and first game of the season, you're playing the Mets, and you get up against Tug McGraw with a chance to win the game, and you homer off Tugger. Take us back to that moment and what you think that did, not only for your career, but for 1974, your first All-Star season, what that moment meant for you.
I remember what set that home run up was winter ball 2 years in a row. In 72 and 73, I went to winter ball 2 years in a row. And in 73, before getting married in 74, actually, this probably would have been in 74, playing in the Latin American World Series in Mexico, in Hermosillo, Mexico. And one little swing of a bat totally changed my perspective on being a hitter. And I remember it specifically. Pedro Borbon, a name out of the past, you may remember, pitched for the Reds back in that day. And I told myself, why am I swinging so hard? Why am I swinging so aggressively? Why am I trying to hit every ball out of the ballpark? Why am I trying to pull every pitch? And this little thing got my mind. Why don't you just try to swing the bat nice and smooth and soft at the ball? And I still, to this day, endorse that approach to hitting. In fact, Bryce Harper looked at me the other day on TV like he did that one time. I saw him hit a double, and it was like he's going, just a nice, soft, easy swing. So I did that, and I actually hit a double. The ball almost went out of the ballpark. And I'll never forget that at bat, because I carried that at bat through spring training in 74 and almost all the way through that season in 74. In fact, that home run you're talking about came as a result of a nice soft swing with the game on the line at a time when I would have been really uptight and nervous and, squeezing the bat really hard and trying to pull the ball. And, I didn't hit the screwball for sure, but fastballs and hit it out of the ballpark. And it was directly as a result of an experience I had in winter ball. And there's another swing, another stepping stone to my career, a positive moment in my career. And as you mentioned, I wasn't sure I was ready to be there in 73. The entire year in 73 was a struggle. And I don't know, I was hitting 8th in the batting order. I made the team in 74 in spring training. Got around to me in the 8th hole, and I hit a home run off the Tug to win the game. And following that was a great first half. I ended up making the All-Star team. I was hitting .320 with 18 home runs at All-Star break. 60 RBIs was pretty good back then, back in those days at the break. And ended up having a great 1974 year. In fact, I think I finished in the top 5 in MVP voting. So there was a new Mike Schmidt in town, young kid, single, manager's doghouse all the time, whole lot of spots. And now I come in town in 74 as a married man, a new approach to hitting, total lifestyle change in terms of, where my priorities lied. And I grew up prior to that year, and I owe a lot of that to my wife, Donna. And so now we're taking off on an entire new approach to life and playing, Major League Baseball. And I belonged at that point. I knew I belonged.
You knew you did. And for you and for, I would say, most ball players, the moment that you understand that, hey, I belong here, is the moment that you can really kind of take off and feel comfortable in your own skin and start doing the things that you've been doing your whole life, but now doing it at the highest level. So that's a perfect segue back to, take me back to the earlier days in Ohio when you're playing little league ball, then you're playing high school ball and then college ball. I know you were a big fan of the game, obviously going to get Reds games when you could and that kind of thing. When did you decide that baseball was going to be what you pursued? Like, how early did you know I got a chance at this?
I went to Ohio University, where they had a program that was widely known to be a great baseball program in the Northeast, Midwest, whatever you want to call Ohio, where it's located. It's a cold weather climate. You got lucky if you play 30 games, in the spring. Nowadays, the number of games they play in college are crazy, and the experience kids get in college now is off the charts. But back then, there were 30 games to be played. And when I first started, I was a switch hitter, highly unsure of myself, very insecure. I hit left-handed, obviously right-handed, and I was a pretty good defensive player. And when I was right-handed, I hit a few long home runs to left field. But, I was nowhere near being a professional baseball prospect, nowhere near. And again, some breaks happened. The shortstop on the varsity team after my freshman year signed a professional contract, and there was no one. I played shortstop back then, and there was no one to fill that gap but me. Little old me, and I was not ready for it, but I ended up being given that job, and I worked my way into belonging. And at one series, Bob Wren, our coach back then, said, "Mike, why don't you try to hit all right-handed for a while?" Because that was my side. First at bat, hitting right-handed, home run down the left field line. I surely didn't hit it to right field or anything, but I pulled it down the left field line, and I never hit left-handed again the rest of my life. And I still got a pretty good swing left-handed, but I always wanted to hit once in the major leagues left-handed, but I never did. And there again, another life-changing moment. If I stay as a switch hitter, I would have never become a professional prospect. And the timing, who knows, had I struck out that first at bat or something, I hit a home run that first at bat. So I became a believer in right-handed hitting. And I slowly worked myself into being noticed by some scouts as shortstop, pretty big guy, good arm, good defense, ran well, could hit with power, all the things they looked for back then in a prospect. And scouts started coming to games. I became an All-American my junior year. I noticed those guys with the books sitting up in the stands every time we played a game, and kind of, made me feel more confident when I know they were there to watch me. And I ended up being drafted by the Phillies after my senior year. And so that's kind of the story of my pre-Phillies baseball, and worked out, drafted second by the Phillies, 30th pick. I think I was the first college player picked.
Oh, how about that? Okay.
In 1971. So I went to Reading, got to stay there. Another life-changing moment at Reading. I hit a home run to win an exhibition game.
Yeah.
Right, for the big club, not the Reading club,
right,
where I would end up playing in my first, where I'd be assigned as a minor league player by the Phillies, and but play for the big club, hit a home run to win the game, and rather than sending me to Pennsylvania, wherever, Spartanburg or I forget the other name of the team, the other high A team. I got to start right in Reading, so that saved me a year.
Yeah.
So timing is everything, Murph.
No doubt about it. You got to have your timing as a ball player, and timing is everything in life as well. So the answer to the trivia question, Mike Schmidt's first home run as a Philly, probably isn't what everyone thinks. That didn't happen in 72. It happened in 71 because you were wearing the Phillies uniform at the time. That's
right.
I might have to hold that one in my back pocket and win some money on that one. Let's jump ahead. Let's jump ahead. So obviously throughout the 70s, the team, the Phillies come together and are a juggernaut in the NL East and the National League. But for whatever reason, in 77 and 78, things don't come all the way together. There's just something missing. As you think back, and I'm sure you've talked about this many times, when you think back, what do you think was missing from that club that didn't allow you guys, because talent-wise, as good as anybody in the league?
I can only think about myself in terms of what I didn't have that I had, when we ended up getting into the playoffs, getting through the first, when we got beat by the Dodgers twice and we got beat by the Reds in 76. What didn't we have? Well, obviously the first two times it was experience, confidence, and the big red machine in 76, and then the pretty good Dodger team, 77 and 78, and then it was the Pirates in 79 that prevented us from getting into the postseason. So the swagger in the postseason, just the confidence that we can beat anybody at any time. Maybe the clutch hitting off of the bench that we ended up having in 1980. And I know that for sure because I had a personal relationship with Del Unser, who got a couple of big hits when I didn't come through. It's hard to really put into words exactly what was missing. Now, if you take me to if I take you to 1980 and say what was missing, I say, well, we had a guy named Pete Rose in 1980 who was part of the team that beat us in 76, and just having him around sort of let the air out of the balloon. We all kind of, just could feed off of Pete. He finally said it in a World Series after we got through Houston and Montreal, was, hey, you guys, just relax. This is the most fun time you'll ever have. Just hang around me. I'll show you guys how to get through this World Series. But that really happened in Houston and Montreal. And having a guy like Pete, you wouldn't believe that in baseball one guy could make such a difference. In basketball, you get a Kareem Jabbar in the middle, and he can take you to the promised land. In football, I guess maybe you could have a great quarterback who could do that. But in a team sport like baseball, you always wonder, well, how can one guy make such a difference? And Pete was, I don't know, he was probably never given that kind of respect that we know that he should get in baseball, because the guys that play the game understand there's one guy in the history of baseball that could change a 3-game series or a 5-game postseason series, and it's Pete Rose. He's always, like you say, he's always got a nose for the ball.
Yeah.
You never want to bet against Pete Rose in a big game. So just the having him rub off when everybody else made a difference that's, again, really hard to explain. So that's what we didn't have in the first 3 postseason ventures was Pete Rose. So even if he didn't win the World Series MVP or the NL MVP, I think, which Manny Trio may have won that year in 1980, he was truly the MVP. I'd give him my MVP trophy back anytime.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you look back and you listen to some of the interviews that were happening, during that season, then afterwards, about not only on the field, obviously dynamic player later in his career at that point, but dynamic player still on the field. but what he was able to do inside that clubhouse with you guys, and kind of take the heat off of some of you and bring it on to him and allow the focus to be on him so that the rest of you guys could just go out and relax and play baseball. I think I don't know, he seemed to embrace that kind of role.
Clubhouses back then were a bit different than they are now. One reason maybe now is social media, of course, and there's a lot of headphones and cell phones and guys kind of into their own thing, watching TV or whatever. Back then, there was a lot of good-natured jabbing and yelling across the clubhouse, and guys getting on each other, and there wasn't. I think we were all guys that needed someone that we totally respected to tell us how good we are, how good we should be. Pete Rose when Pete Rose said I was the best player he ever played with, coming from the team that had a whole bunch of best players on it, and Foster and Morgan and Griffey and going right down the line. And he came there, whether he really meant it or not, when he told the world that Mike Schmidt was the best player he's ever seen or ever played with. You have any idea what that did for me?
Yeah, I can imagine.
I walked around in my uniform going, I'm the best player there is. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that that kind of a comment from any of my teammates prior to Pete arriving. We all had this kind of insecurity. It's the best way I can.
Yeah.
We're all great young players, but we were all kind of insecure in our own skin. And he totally changed that. He totally changed that. What Larry Bowe and Gregg Lazinski and those guys, having Pete next to him, totally changed our team dynamic.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, coming into the 80 season, a lot of folks thought maybe the window had closed on the Phillies, that you guys were past your prime. If even as young, you had so many good young players, but you weren't favored to win the division at that point. In fact, I think you were picked to come in third or fourth. Go ahead, say that again, Mike.
Well, the phone rang. I thought.
I didn't even hear it. It's all right. So then you come into the season, you start playing good baseball, then you go into a swoon, you start to maybe fall out of the race. And then I think there was a couple pretty public moments where Dallas maybe overturned a table in the clubhouse. And I know Paul Owens came down at one point and challenged you guys. And the month of September, it would seem like a whole different ball club. And that's when it all kind of came together, and you thought, all right, this team is going to do it.
Yes, the overturning tables and emptying the spread on the floor, and the general manager coming down and screaming and throwing a lot of F words around at us, and telling us that we better get our butts in order or whatever. But those things happen all the time. Now, today, I'm not sure the expletives are thrown around like they used to be in the old days, but that's all part of a team going through a season. Well, for 7 months, there's always a few of those kind of meetings, following a 5-game losing streak, or somebody not hustling to first, or somebody being late for something, not preparing for a game as hard as we should. Those are all basic subjects of these meetings that happen. Most of the time, it's basically guys not hitting, pitchers not making their pitches. And but down the stretch, we had to do some spectacular things to get in that postseason. And I can hear where you're coming from. 3 postseason failures in a row. Yeah. If the fourth one happened, right? But again, I go back, Pete wasn't going to let it happen. Right. And we had to beat Chicago 4 in a row at home. I remember that because the first of that series, my grandmother had died, and I had to fly to Dayton, go to the funeral, and fly back to Philly in time to get in my uniform for the game. And of course, I wasn't playing in that game. I did pinch hit in that game. And I think Gary Maddox ended up getting a really big hit in that game. I didn't get the hit when they put me in, but we beat the Cubs 4 in a row.
Yep.
And I think I can't remember. This is one of those, this really tests my brain exactly how those 4 games went down, but we did beat the Cubs 4 in a row. Then we had to go to Montreal and win 2 out of 3.
Yep.
Which was a tough assignment, because if they beat us 2 out of 3 at home, they were going to go to the NLCS. And there was only 2. There was an NLCS and a World Series back then. Now there's a whole bunch of,
right.
postseason levels you have to get through. And I do remember a lot of guys having a good series up in Montreal. A lot of guys having, to win those games, we had to have a lot of guys have good series. And I had a good series at a time when the Phillies most needed it. And there again, another stepping stone in my career. Didn't have that kind of a series in those previous NLCS opportunities,
right.
But I did have one in Montreal.
Certainly did.
Home runs to win games, important home runs. We won the first 2 in Montreal, which locked us up for the NLCS. And other guys, Bake and Bull and Booney and Boa, everybody. Pete, it seemed like guys were getting on base. Pitchers were doing their job. Tug was closing games out. So we made it. We made it into the postseason, and of course, this time we went into the postseason with Pete and the Houston Astros. So
One
the
of the greatest of all time, that series.
Yeah, one of the great postseasons of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm not going to ask you to relive all those moments, but just the overall tension and then relief at the end when you finally you come back in that series and win the final 2 games of the series, final 3 games of the series, 2 games of the series to clinch, and you're headed to the World Series, and you've gotten over that stone that was in your way for the last couple of years. Do you remember that feeling? Is that you're able to bring that right back?
Well, that was the first. I want to say another career timing thing, and I owe it to Del Unser, because I struck out with the tying or winning or whatever. It was a big run on third base, and they took out Nolan Ryan.
Yes,
they removed Nolan Ryan and didn't let him pitch to me. They brought a guy in called Ken Forsch, who struck me out with the tying run or winning. I think it was tying run on third base in the last game of that series. But imagine we were down 3 runs to Nolan Ryan with 6 outs to go or something like that. The odds weren't good of us winning it in Houston, in the Astrodome, like 60,000 people. You needed earplugs. It was so bad. Before I got to the bat rack to throw my bat at something, Del Unser had a double.
Yeah.
And tied the game up, and solely just got the monkey off of my back. And that was one of the biggest hits I ever got. Del Unser. Got it.
Thank you, Del.
Yeah.
Well, hey, and to your point, in Montreal, the big hits, baseball is one of those sports. You need guys coming up at big moments and making things happen. And
those kind of things didn't happen in the first 3 postseasons. And Del, I was not the only one, but I mean, we had other pinch hitters get big hits, and I think I can remember Keith Moreland getting him a really big hit. And, who was it? Gregg Gross led off an inning with a perfect bunt off of Nolan Ryan, and you just on and on and on. I can't remember them all, but there were all kind of little moments that that we pulled off as a team, with guys coming off the bench, and we just wouldn't die. They called us the team that wouldn't die. And then, of course, there's no way the Royals could have beat us in the World Series.
Yeah, you get to Kansas City, you get to the World Series, and it just felt like, you'd already won it. It was just a matter of time at that point to put the Kansas City aside and bring that championship home. A side note, I would love to ask Nolan Ryan about the bunt that Gregg laid down, because I'm sure Nolan, I know that Nolan didn't like guys bunting against him to begin with. And in a moment like that, for Gross to lay down that perfect bunt, I'm sure that is something that Nolan still sees in his sleep.
Yeah, to put an inning together against Nolan Ryan with a couple of outs remaining for the Astros to go to the World Series was amazing. It was amazing. And, I was one of the black marks in the middle of that inning, and Dale Unser came up and erased it all. And you just have to have players do those kind of things to be a championship team.
Yeah, and you guys certainly did it. All right, before I let you go, I just want a couple quickies. We mentioned Nolan Ryan. I mean, you faced obviously a dozen Hall of Fame pitchers in your career. Who was the toughest guy, you think, for you? Not necessarily for anybody else, but for you, when he was out on the mound, that you were like, it might be a long day for me.
Well, we don't have to go any further than Nolan.
Okay.
Nolan's repertoire of pitches consisted of two: a nose-to-toes curveball and a fastball that he grunted on, and that's how you knew the fastball was coming. He grunted.
Okay. Doesn't mean you could hit it, right?
And fortunately, J.R. Richard, one of his teammates there, I didn't have to face very much because he had a shortened career health-wise, but Nolan. You looked ahead a couple of games when the Astros came to town, or you went to Houston, and you hoped that you got to miss him and, face Negro or Nepper or, the other guys in their rotation. But no, Nolan gave you some sleepless nights. He was a tough pitcher. He had a mean streak. I have some Nolan Ryan stories that, that I could make a speech at a cocktail party and get people belly laughing about some of the moments I had facing Nolan Ryan. And I have Nolan Ryan. I think game-winning home runs, about 5 of them off.
5, I think. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sure he remembers them.
I'm sure he does.
But I also have a pretty low, as most right-handers do, low career average against Nolan Ryan. So
I looked up your numbers against Nolan. They're not as bad as you think. I mean, yeah, average-wise, maybe a little bit low, but you certainly had your moments against them.
I got a few knocks off him. I broke up a no-hitter with 2 outs in the 9th inning one time.
Yep.
And you would not believe this, but it was off of a curveball. I hit it. I don't know how the heck I did it, but I hit a Nolan Ryan curveball. So I remember one hit I got off of Nolan Ryan's curveball. And, of course, he had a no-hitter going. It was, I think, the 9th inning in Houston. That was a miracle. That was one of my career miracles. Not that happening are golly.
Yeah.
Against that happening are crazy. But yeah, he was the toughest guy. Most right-handed hitters would say during their careers, if they faced Nolan Ryan, I would say Nolan Ryan. He's the toughest battle you had as a right-handed hitter.
All right. Well, maybe one of these days, somewhere down the road, we'll get you to come back and tell the Nolan Ryan stories as well. But I just want to finish with this, because you've talked at length after your career was over that at times the game was fun for you, and at times the game was not as fun as it should have been for you. I want to know, when was the game the most fun for you? What do you, when you look back and think about it, is it the 80 season? Is it that simple, that it was the season that it all came together for you guys? Or when did it all kind of feel just right for you?
I don't know if it ever did. That may be a strange answer. Sure, the game was fun when you're 2 for 2 and you're beating the other team pretty good, and you're coming up for your 3rd and 4th at bats, and there's no pressure, and you get another hit. And the game was a lot of fun when I had the 4 home run game.
Yep.
Right? So, but I don't want to be the kind of guy that says, the game was work for me all the time. I mean, it was always work. It was always head down, blinders on, every moment of the game is my job, and I got to grind all the time. And it was kind of that way because I looked around at the players around me, teammates, and I saw them having more fun, them enjoying themselves on the field. And you brought up Tug McGraw, and I think he seemed like the kind of player that always had fun when he was out there. And I don't think I was the opposite of Tug McGraw. I mean, I didn't look in the stands much. I didn't laugh a lot on the field. And those are all, kind of things, if I had it to do all over again, I would have figured out a way to enjoy my time as a major league player a lot more. I enjoy my post-career time a lot more.
Right.
And I think that I may not have reached the levels of a career that I did reach, if I would have just gone about it as a time to enjoy, a career that I should enjoy more. I was being paid to play Major League Baseball. I should have had a smile on my face more often, right? But I was more of a grinder. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You would never know that by watching me. You would, when you watch me, you would have figured, this is easy for him. And, I used to be called cool, and
right.
All those kind of things. But I wasn't. Internally, I was grinding all the time. From noon every day till noon, till midnight every night during a baseball season. I was grinding. I was mentally thinking about what was going to happen, the pitcher that night, and mechanically what I needed to do as a hitter. So I don't know. That's a long answer to your question. I wish I would have had more fun. I really do.
Well, I can say this. I was a younger kid watching the Phils back then when you were playing, but and I know you know this at this point, even though maybe at the time you weren't enjoying it, the enjoyment that you brought to tens of thousands of Phillies fans all over the world, really, people will never forget it. And that's why, this opportunity to chat with you about it is so exciting for us because of what you were able to accomplish on the field. And we really appreciate it, Mike.
Murph, that's nice of you to say. Anytime. And I wish you best of luck with this new venture.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Mike, the best third baseman ever to play Major League Baseball, joining us here on Glove Stories with Murph. Mike, we'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you back up here in Philadelphia when the season gets started. I know. I'm looking forward to it. All right, baby. Mike Schmidt, thank you. Glove Stories continues in just a couple minutes. Charlie Manuel will join us and relive one of those great games back from the 2008 season. So stay with us here on Glove Stories with Murph. Welcome back to Glove Stories with Murph, and we're going to do something fun in this particular segment, and we're going to do this the entire season. Each week, we are going to relive a game from two of the seasons, well, the best seasons in Phillies history. You remember them? 1980, of course, and 2008. So when we relive 1980, our special guest is going to be Larry Bowa. And when we relive 2008, well, you can't do that without the guy who was sitting on the end of the bench, the manager of the 2008 Phillies. Charlie Manuel will join us to relive those games. Charlie, great to see you.
Great to see you, Gregg. Really happy, very happy to be with you. And I'm looking for shows this summer, and I know they're going to be good.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And what's more fun than reliving the glory days of the championship season of 2008? And what I've always marveled about is the way that you guys are able to recall that season in such detail, just like the fans can. But, I want to pick that brain and I want to relive some of the best games. So we're going to do that. And we're going to start with game number 3 of the season. So you'll remember in 2007, obviously the team makes the postseason. You get swept out by Colorado. You come back in 2008, and there's all kinds of expectations around this team. And then right out of the gate, the Nationals come to town. Citizens Bank Park is going nuts. And you guys dropped the first 2 games. What do you remember about that?
I remember that year that Brett Myers started the first game for us, and he got knocked around some, of course, and we lost that first game. And then the next night, Hamels pitched to Jim, and we couldn't score for him, and it was a tough night for us. And then we had the third game where we come from behind, and we caught up and put a 6 spot on them, and we caught them, and we ended up winning the game in the 10th inning. And actually, once we got down from about the 5th inning on, our pitching was really good in that game. I remember some of our relievers coming in and getting and doing a real good job.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you about that, but let me ask you about Jamie first, because here you are 0-2 to start the season, and in Philadelphia it's 162 games, but you start the season 0-3, and people are going to start to say, "What's going on with this team?" So you send Jamie Moyer out there, and in the first inning, as you mentioned, 5 quick runs, hit after hit after hit, and the Nats bat around in the first inning.
Right, Tom. When I said Jamie Moyer was a unique and a very different kind of pitcher. I seen him pitch all through in the minor leagues. I seen him in the major leagues. Matter of fact, he got sent out of the big leagues twice, and I made the statement that he might have a hard time getting back. Not only did he get back, but he took time out to get $100 million in between that time. But no, when he give up 5 runs, usually in the first inning for Jamie, every now and then, if you notice early in the game, if you go back in his patterns, he'd give up a couple runs or 3 runs or something. 5's usually quite a bit for him. But there again, if you stop and think how we played and how I trusted our team and the players that we had, to me, 5 runs was not, that's, don't get me wrong, 5 runs is 5 runs, but at the same time, we were still in that game of 5 runs. I always looked at it as we were in the game from 5 to 8 runs, really. And I left him in there, and probably maybe 4 innings might have been a long. Maybe I probably should have hit for him. I probably could have, with no problem. But at the same time, too, it was early in the season. Probably I wanted to make sure that he got some pitches in, for his next outing.
Sure.
And he end up giving up another run, and given the run that we got back. So, when I took him out, he'd give up 6 runs. And after that,
so you mentioned Chris Coast hits a home run, get you 1 run closer, but then Moyer gives it right back in the next inning. So that was it. You pull him, and in comes Chad Durbin. And as you mentioned, at that point, the pitching seemed to settle down a little bit. In fact, the relievers only gave up 1 more run from that point on, and that was a big part of the game. You're getting good innings from your relievers.
Actually, when you're behind early in the game and things like that, when you go to your bullpen, it's one of the things that I used to think about too, and therefore it'll take us back to the 5 runs that they scored early. Usually we try to keep the game, in striking distance, because, with our offense and the way we play, we can catch you. So it's very important for those guys that's coming out of the bullpen, our long guys or our middle inning guys or whatever, they gave us they gave us a tremendous game here, and it actually gave us a chance to win the game.
Yeah, so you're down 6-1, and then the 6th inning comes around, bottom of the 6th, and you guys are coming to bat, top of the order, and just like that, as you mentioned, and it would become a theme in 2008, the offense turns on and hit after hit after hit, and 8 hits and a hit by pitch in that inning, and you put 6 runs up on the board, and it was all your big guys too. Single, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, people used to look at us as a power hitting team. Charlie loves home runs, which I do, probably more than anybody in the world. But at the same time, too, I also like the way the game was played, and I liked. We had a lot of speed, and we had a lot of guys that can handle a bat and hit. And actually, Tom, if you look at it, we had regular players on the field. Not day in, day out. Most of the time we had regular players on the field. If we gave somebody a break or something, we only had 1 or 2 players that was out of our lineup at those times. But we had very consistent offense, and that right there sometimes allows us to keep pitchers in the game.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and you know, and as you pointed out, and we saw this, and you know, we know how it ended, so you can look back and think about it. But you're right. This offense always seemed to be in striking distance. If the number was 5 or even 6, this team felt like, you know what, we can get back there, and that was part of the swagger of the '08 team, was it not?
Without a doubt. You know, we had we put forth a lot of effort. We came to the ballpark every day focused on trying to win. Also, Tom, you know, like people will look. Sometimes the game is kind of being played. You hear my pitching coach say, well, we got to keep some pitching for tomorrow. I can go back and tell you now, actually, I wanted to win that if we were close to winning that game or in that game, that night I wanted to win that game. You know, like me personally, I will attack tomorrow, you know, like when we get there. But at the same time, when you're like winning that game, I look at numbers as we go through the season, you know, like about our win and loss record and things like that. And I've always looked at it as being a 2-game swing around. You know, like if you win, you know, like, yeah, you won one game. If you lose, then, you know, like you lost one. But at the same time, if you win and you look up at the end of the year, it's kind of like our record. I did notice that our record was 15-13 at the end of the month. And one of the biggest things about that is 2 overtime will get you 12 wins. 2 over each month will get you 12 wins during the season. And that means gives you 92, 93 wins.
Absolutely.
Like that. And so therefore, you know, like I always kind of looked at those, the numbers I looked at, it, you know, like where we was at and everything, you know, like during the season, if you can compete and stay close, you will never give up. You know, like I think, you know, like actually, unless you get like 20-some games out with, you know, like with 42 to play or something or whatever.
Right. All right. Well, let's jump back in because Ryan Madson gives up another run, and now the game is tied at 7. So we go to extra innings in this one. And in the bottom of the 10th, Jimmy starts off the inning with a base hit, and then you have Shane Victorino sacrifice him over to second. And then all of a sudden, Jesus Colon for the Nationals cannot throw a strike. He ends up intentionally walks Chase Utley, and then he walks Ryan Howard, and then Jason Worth steps to the plate, and once again, he can't find the plate. Right, exactly. I mean, you know, like he all of a sudden he just you know, like he just couldn't get the ball over the plate, and you know, like we stayed with them. We caught up with them early when they went ahead of us. And the game actually turned out to be a heck of a game. And at the end, you know, like we did get a chance, and actually we took advantage of that break and won the game. The bunt was important for us. You know, like people don't anymore. The bunt's kind of out of baseball, but to me, the bunt puts a runner in scoring position, and we got all this consistent hitting behind it. So you know, like we'll give an out for a run, you know, like any day of the week. Yeah. And you knew you had a guy in Shane Victorino that can get the butt down more often than not. And that may be what's missing in today's game is that, you know, those kinds of players aren't around as much because they don't practice it. But Shane, you knew Shane could get it down. You ask him to do it, and he gets the job done. And you talked about managing this game to win this game. It's game 3 of the season, but you used 21 players and 7 pitchers. That's managing to win a game, is it not? That's okay. We won that game, and also that right there put us in a chance to win the next day too, because you know, like it changed it. Hey, we finally got a win after 3 games, and you know, like and we just hung in there, and you know, like, and things started happening for us, and it early in the season, you got to really be careful because those game counts too. You know, like, and you see people say, well, wait till we get to September, and they'll start telling you about resting players and things like that. And I used to really kind of not like that in some respect, because I always figured resting the player unless he was hurt or something, that's between him and I, if that makes sense. Yeah. And you know, and if he gets tired and everything like that, it's up to me and my coaches to see it. And, you know, like, and, you know, call him in and communicate with him and maybe give him a blow. But at the same time, too, we wanted to have, you know, like a starting lineup. And actually, we always wanted to have our bullpen organized and everything. To me, that was one of the biggest
things about the World Series, but at the same time, too, during the whole stay that we got in the big streak of 5 consecutive titles, like that came into play. I think organizing our bullpen, because when we had trouble in our bullpen with it being organized, it seemed like our team got in trouble.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think that's true for most teams. And you can say that even in today's game. If you don't have that bullpen figured out, it doesn't always go as well. Well, Charlie, you got the win that day in April. You went to 1-2, and you thought, okay, all right, things are going to go. Who knew how it was going to end at the end of 08? But we're going to take you through the rest of the season a little by little as we go on here with Glove Stories with Murph. But Charlie, great to see you. The next time, I think we're sliding into May, and we're going to talk about a game in May next time we have you on the program. But always good to talk to you, and we'll see you soon on Glove Stories with Murph. When coming up, we've got Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer, so don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Glove Stories with Murph. Thanks to Charlie Manuel, reliving Game 3 of that 2008 season. And now we jump ahead. We jump ahead to today, the present, because we want to touch base each week with this 2021 baseball team. So we're going to welcome in today Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Phillies beat writer for the Inquirer. Matt, thanks for being with us. And you are around these guys, and you are on the beat for the Philadelphia Phillies. So I wanted to pick your brain about where you think this team is right now as they break camp and get ready for opening day, and some of the decisions that they made, because there weren't a whole lot of roster spots available, but the jobs that people were fighting for really came down to the end. We'll start in center field. Scott Kingery gets word that he's headed down to the alternate site. Were you surprised by that? You're surprised by how that all played out?
I certainly would have been surprised a month ago, like when spring training started. I don't think anybody had Scott Kingery pegged for the alternate site, but that's the kind of camp he had. He led the team in strikeouts, never seemed comfortable at the plate, working on a new swing that just kind of seems lost. And maybe this is not only best for the Phillies, but it's best for Scott Kingery, who is under contract for three more seasons, could play an important role here. So if the cost of that important role is to have him go to Allentown for a month, 2 months, X amount of weeks to get right, it's worth it. It's the right thing to do, because he wasn't ready to play in the majors right now. He needs time with no pressure, go to Allentown, work on this swing, get back to where you were. Like you knew who he was 3 years ago. Like, this guy was a can't miss prospect that has kind of struggled for a multitude of reasons. And I think this is the best thing they can do to get him right.
Yeah, it was surprising, the result of camp, but yeah, the decision kind of was made for them when Scott struggled the way he did. But also, Odubel Herrera, who it started off hot, then kind of cooled in the middle, and then got pretty good at the very end of camp. But we get word earlier this week, also not going to be on the active roster. So that means that Hazley and Quinn are moving forward with the team. Again, any surprises there for you?
Yeah, so Odubel, the most important thing is that just for baseball reasons, he's not on the 40-man roster. So you have to get him on the roster, and to get him on the roster, you need to lose somebody from the roster. And he really needed to force their hand to say that he's enough of a difference from Adam Hazley or Roman Quinn that you're going to trim somebody off the 40-man roster when you're already trimming to get on Brandon Kinsler or Matt Joyce. So he didn't do that. He didn't run away with this job. None of these guys did. So there's no reason to make the move right now to get him on the roster when you can give Hazley a shot, Quinn a shot, and heck, like Mickey Moniak's on the 40-man roster. He could be ahead of Odubel Herrera. Scott Kingery's on the 40-man roster. If he has a good month in Allentown, he could move ahead on the depth chart of Odubel Herrera. So he didn't win the job. He didn't force the Phillies' hand, and now he's in Allentown, but it's a nice piece. If you need somebody, if Hazley and Quinn, struggle, Odubel Herrera is waiting. So you just did not have to make that move this week before opening day.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in that regard. All right, one move that really did surprise me, even at the end of camp, was Jojo Romero going down. Not only because I thought he pitched pretty well during spring, but also another left-hander in that bullpen, but they decide to go with some more of the veteran arms. What are your thoughts on how that decision all played out?
Yeah, I was surprised by that too, just because him and Connor Brogdon from last year really emerged as like, as that bullpen was such direct, but those two guys pitched really well, young, up and coming. Seemed like they would play a key role this season. And Jojo Romero didn't pitch himself out of a role this spring. He had a fine spring. Like you said, he's left-handed. They're going to carry, instead of, it seemed like maybe they would have 3 left-handers at some point this spring. Now they're going to have 1 in the bullpen. And that kind of complicates it. You're playing, a lot of teams in this NL East are, have tough left-handed bats. And especially late in the game, you're going to have only one option out there. And I like Jojo Romero, but Joe Girardi points to the splits, reverse splits of Archie Bradley, who's actually better last season against left-handed hitters. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to, Connor Brogdon's efficient against left-handers. You're going to have to use your right-handed pitchers as really, the guys you go to get the big left-handed outs.
Yeah, because the other left-hander in that bullpen, which is one of the best stories in camp in Alvarado, is a guy that you're going to want to use late in games. You're not going to want to use him situationally more than likely in the 6th or 7th inning. You're looking at him as an 8th, 9th inning kind of guy, right?
He might be the closer. Yeah. I would say that before his last 2 of his last 3 outings were pretty shaky for spring training, but he's at least going to pitch his way into that role of the 8th or 9th inning, sooner rather than later. He might not be the closer on opening day, but if he has the stuff, he has the best stuff in the bullpen. So, if he can just harness that control a little bit, throwing 100 miles per hour casually, it's like not even a big deal. Like when he throws 100, you're like, yeah, that's just what he throws. It's not, it's not, you don't drop your jaw at it anymore. And like you said, best story of spring training, he lost 50 pounds when he got traded from the Rays to the Phillies. Came into camp, refocused, saying, if I want to have a career, I have to look at myself here and lose this weight and focus and use my talent, that my 100-mile-per-hour sinker. And he looked awesome. It's just a matter of getting it together and where they kind of slots in.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you know what? Give me a guy like that, a guy that figured it out, that says, I better put the work in if I'm going to get the benefits of everything that comes with it. And he seems to be a guy that said a light bulb went on and, okay, yeah, here's what I've got to do. That's good stuff. All right, back into the rotation. We're hearing a lot from a lot of different folks. The Phils are running it back. And if you look at the lineup and you look at the guys that have made the team late in spring, a lot of the same names that we saw last year. Offensively, hey, why not, right? They scored a lot of runs last year. Did the Phillies do enough, do you think? Did they make enough changes that they'll be better off than they were at the end of last season?
I think so. And yeah, it is easy to say when the 2 biggest acquisitions were Didi Gregorius and JT Realmuto. But like you said, the lineup was not the problem last year. The problem was the bullpen. And I think the bullpen's a lot better than it was last year. It's not perfect, but it's not the 1930 bullpen. So that's a huge upgrade. That last season, a bullpen that just was decent gets you into the playoffs. Now they have a bullpen that's better than decent. And the rotation, I think, is deeper. You're always going to need more than 5 starters, but this season more than ever, going from a 60-game season to a 162, you're going to need, 8 starters, 9 starters to get through this season. Plus, who knows how the virus is going to play out, and you're going to have double headers or whatever. It could be a messy season just like last year. So you're going to need starting pitchers. And I think they start the year with a solid 5 starters. You have a 1, 2, and 3. Put them up against anybody's 1, 2, 3 in the league. Are they the best? No, but they're up there. They're 3 guys that are legitimate front of the rotation starters. And Matt Moore and Chase Anderson, I think, are 2 key pieces here. Where Matt Moore went to Japan last year, pitched really well. He's not like a nobody. He was the number 1 prospect in baseball a decade ago, had all the talent in the world. To his bad luck, had some injuries, and now he went to Japan to write his career. Looks pretty good this spring. Chase Anderson, a guy that he gives you that 5-6 inning start, which is so important this season, like what I said, because of how taxing the year is going to be not just on starters, but on guys in the bullpen.
Yeah.
So you need durability. Chase Anderson gives you that. He's also looked good this spring. And the problem is going to come in with the starting rotation is injuries.
Yeah.
Last week you had Eflin goes down with a minor injury, Vince Velasquez a minor injury, and Spencer Howard, and the Phillies didn't have a fifth starter. So that's how quick it can happen. They need to avoid that this year. They just need to stay healthy because they really only go 7-8 deep at most, and that's kind of stretching it.
Yeah, no, and you know, obviously you can say that about most teams, but it is, you know, when it's right in front of you, and it is for us with the Philadelphia Phillies, you can see how quickly it can unravel if things start to not go your way. All right, Matt, before you let you go, opening day, the pomp and circumstance, fans in the stands, even though limited, but it's got to feel like opening day. But then after that, for the Phillies, the month of April, man, oh man, it's not very easy for these guys right out of the gate.
Yeah, we're going to find out pretty quick what this team is. There's a lot of talk all winter. Are they a playoff team? Are they a fourth place team? We're going to find out in the first month when they're playing a schedule that's heavy on the Braves, the Mets, Marlins, Nationals. They're playing the first 2 months. You know, it's really loaded with NL East teams, and you're going to find out right away where they fit in. And I like it that way. You're not, you know, there's no fooling anybody. You're not getting to the All-Star break saying, well, look at the second half of the schedule and how tough it is. We're going to find out.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. You know, prediction wise, I think they're a third place team, but with a ceiling of winning the division. It's just like, show me you're the first place team before I go out and say you're the first place team. But they have all the talent to do it. So it's going to be a fun season. It's definitely the best team they've had since they started this whole rebuild.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that's a fair prediction. They've got to go out and show that they can do it over the course of 162, which they haven't been able to do over the last couple of years. But if they can do that, you're right. The postseason is in their grasp. Well, Matt Breen, we are going to certainly be following along by reading the Philadelphia Inquirer. We really appreciate you being here with us on our inaugural edition of Glove Stories with Murph. Next week, well, you're going to have to tune in to find out who our special guest is next week, but we certainly hope you will. Until then, I'm Gregg Murphy. Thanks to Mike Schmidt. Thanks to Charlie Manuel. And thanks to Matt Breen. We'll see you next time.